Warning, this content may be upsetting or disturbing to some audiences. People of Reddit who work the day shift at non-haunted businesses and don't spend all your time in the woods, what's the creepiest thing you've experienced? Every few months, in a department with over 20 women, we'd all come in nearly identical outfits. It was odd. We were all ages and races and styles, but there'd be a day when everyone would show up in a black skirt and red blouse, a few months later, gray skirt and black sweater. We could never figure out the trigger. TV show character looking fly in that outfit the night before, a visitor to the building who appeared polished, nothing. I work in residential environments as a service technician. I go to houses and apartments and condos to do my thing. I was working in one particular condo building with over 70 floors and about 8 elevators. The elevators are in 2 groups of 4, with 2 giant elevator shafts. Just picture one giant square that is the lobby and 2 smaller rectangles in that room that are the elevator shafts. This is relevant because it's easy to get disoriented as to which direction you are facing when you exit an elevator. Anyways, after doing a bit of work on the 65th floor unit, I realize I have to go to parking level 1 to a utility room. No big deal. I hop on the elevator and press P1, and take a lonely ride down 60+ floors. I reach P1 level, and when the elevator doors open I hear weeping. I'm immediately worried for whoever is crying, so I start to pinpoint where the noise is coming from. It's a child crying, and since all the walls in this area are bare and concrete, the sound is echoing and seems to be coming from everywhere. Panic didn't set in until I had searched 4 corners of the square room and hadn't found anyone. Now I'm no mathematician, but I'm pretty sure 4 corners is all of them, so my mind starts racing. I decide to nope out and head back to the door that would eventually lead me to the utility room that I was supposed to be working in, which I had already passed earlier on my search. I round the corner and there I found the source of the noise. It's a little girl, with straight black hair, crouched down, sobbing into her knees facing the corner. I don't know why I didn't see her before, because I already checked that corner. For a moment I considered running because that SHT looked like it was straight out of The Ring. But that moment of nonsense subsided and I asked her what's wrong. Turns out she was just lost and scared, so I escorted her back to the concierge desk so security could help her back to her room. Nothing really creepy after the fact, but for a moment, I thought she would turn around with no face or something. I am a teacher of adult students, and one student of mine is kind of intense and creepy. Actually, she's based at another school, but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she kept giving me welcome presents as I was new to the country. She added me on social media and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months and figured she'd just gone back to her own school or stopped studying or whatever, and was relieved that she'd clearly got bored of me. But then last week she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me during lessons that she'd taken. I was a little weirded out to say the least. Was out at lunch in Midtown Atlanta with some co-workers. We sat out on the patio. There are some high-rise condos right across the street. Some guy jumped from his 40th floor balcony and splattered all over the roof of someone's Jetta. Everything went everywhere. The noise was pretty memorable as well. It was a super silent ride back to work. One of my coworkers said he won't sit out on patios anymore when eating. I was playing the PC game Black and White, not a horror game, shortly after it came out. It was late at night and suddenly I hear my speakers whisper my name. There was no reason for it, nothing happened on screen, just my computer whispering my name. Scared the crap out of me. Years later I found out that they had recorded common names in one of the game files, and if the name on your profile matched the name they had recorded, it would have a small chance to randomly play while you were playing. Right after the Virginia Tech shooting, my old office got an anonymous death threat in the mail. Made of cut-up magazine letters, calling out the name of the office and its owners. They called the cops and closed the office for a couple days. Don't know what happened to her. I used to work at a tanning salon, and one day while I was alone during my early morning shift I heard what sounded like a full-grown man running down the hallway. I looked and there was nothing. Just me. No machines were on yet, no one else in the building. I sat in the office until my co-worker arrived. There is currently a beaver living in my place of business. We can't get it out, so we just learn to live with it. I now work with a beaver. Responded to a welfare check for an elderly woman who hadn't been seen in a few days. Found her hanged in a dirt basement wearing her wedding dress, still swaying slightly. Her tongue and eyes bulged from her face and her neck was stretched out. It was effing creepy. New Year's Day, 1995. I was in the middle of third-year university, and a bunch of friends had come down to visit me and my roommate for the festivities. Two of these friends were twin brothers. One of them, we hung out with all the time. The other we'd just met for the first time. Staring right into the nether regions of my soul, the whole time, I back away and join the group again, and he'd keep following me around. I didn't know what to do. "Hey buddy, you alright? We're heading back now, right?" And so on. He wouldn't say anything, he'd just be there on his knees, looking up at me with a clenched face and squinted eyes, as if he were looking directly into the sun or something. Later that day, my roomie said he was tripping balls, so I thought nothing of it and moved on with my life. She didn't die, but still pretty bad. He had even called the police before going, because he knew he was going to do it but he couldn't stop himself from doing it. Because the voices and so on. The ensuing court case was widely covered in the media as this was a relatively smaller community where this sort of thing doesn't happen on a regular basis. He believed to his very bones that his aunt was the devil, and that he had been commanded by God to go and kill her. So, who was this God that told him to go kill her? Well, as the newspaper article described, it was a guy in a group he hung out with on New Year's Day. Didn't take me long to realize that he was talking about me. This was 22 years ago. I know for a fact it was a mental illness, but just knowing that I had somehow commanded him to go kill his aunt stays with me to this day. I am fairly small for a guy. I stand at around 5'5" and the most I've ever weighed was around 150 pounds. About 6 or 7 years ago I didn't have my license despite being far old enough to drive, but a good buddy of mine wanted to hang out. We would both be walking 5 miles. It was 3 a.m. on a cold winter night and I was wearing a black jacket with my hood up. About 2 miles into my hike along the main road, a car pulled into a parking spot of a home I was passing, just a few feet behind me. He wasn't entirely into the driveway, almost halfway hanging out into the road. I kept pacing forward and ignored the car behind me, expecting them to roll down a window and shout at me. It didn't happen. The car just sat at the edge of that driveway, running but completely dark inside to the point that I could only barely make out the figure of a large man. I don't typically get frightened by much, but something in the air made me tense up and my heart kind of dropped to my stomach. I stopped and turned to look at the car. I had a feeling that the person driving was watching me intently. The figure in the car was definitely facing me. I could see the reflection from his dash bouncing off of his eyes. I stared back. I figured he was about to yell out to me, but he just sat quietly in a strangely menacing way that I have only ever seen scenes in movies play out. He didn't budge, just stared intently. I returned to pacing away, slightly brisker. After just a few moments I could hear the car slowly roll in reverse, so I turned to face it but kept pacing backwards. The car kept creeping, slowly. I pulled down my hood and stood still again, waiting for him to pass me. But instead the man slowed to a stop beside me. No words were exchanged at all, and before I could even let out a hello, the man grimaced and accelerated away at a decent pace, almost as if he was disappointed by what he had seen. It doesn't seem like much from how it reads, but I'll never forget how tense that interaction was for me. I've not felt anything like it since. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old couple come through my line buying a wok. The husband, who was at least 85, started making conversation with me about the wok, and asked if I liked Chinese food. "Yeah, I like Chinese. Do you want to go out with me to get some Chinese?" He winks at me, and "No sir." "Oh. Well." He looks a bit disappointed and turns to look at his wife, who is on the phone with someone. "Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement?" "No." The rest of the transaction took place in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I worked from 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. at a gas station in one of the nicer cities around here, and I had a gentleman look me in the eyes and ask if I'm enjoying my last day on Earth. Walked away before I could answer. A senior partner at the firm hitting on the receptionist. She's younger than his kids. The thing is, she's often too naive to notice, and says that he's just treating her like her uncle would, and just being friendly. Hearing music that isn't actually playing from the store speakers. Quiet, but there. Given the SHT I was dealing with at the time, I'm fine writing it off as a hallucination/delusion. Not creepy but definitely frightening. I used to manage a small family-owned retail store. It was the 4th of July and the owners of course took the day off and dropped the responsibility on me. One of them comes flying through the front door on one leg spewing profanity before collapsing on the ground. I look down and see his actual ankle. Like the bone. Blood is going everywhere. Dude was riding tandem on the forklift, a giant safety no-no, when the driver took a hard turn and sent the kid off the side, running over his foot. The driver screeched to a halt, thought he stopped on the kid's foot. He didn't, so he popped the forklift in reverse and ran over the foot again. Anyway, I learned that day that I keep my cool in emergency situations. Grabbed and elevated the kid's foot, instructed someone to call 911. Always tell a specific person to call 911, never say someone call 911, and another person to get towels to try and stop the bleeding. They managed to save the kid's foot but he had a battle ahead of him. His foot went necrotic and he went septic, I think that's the right term, at one point, but he survived. I don't work there anymore. There were a lot of unsafe practices going on and the owners didn't treat their employees very well. I left about 3 years ago and surprise surprise they shut down about a year and a half later. Our old house was on a corner, and in lieu of a backyard had a side yard, with a small deck that wrapped around the back. The dining room had patio doors that lead out to the back and we would have BBQs and such back there. When I was about 14, we only had one desktop computer and one laptop for the family. My brother and I would fight over the desktop. That's where Diablo 2 was installed, so I would use the laptop to write music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over and they were downstairs doing whatever and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapped up in my writing, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock on the patio door, which startled me. I looked up, expecting my brother or his friend. The basement had a door that led to the back deck as well. Standing at the door, and waving was a person, could not tell us sex or age, wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother or his friend, I mouthed "good one" and gave the person the finger and they walked away. As soon as they left I went downstairs to give them shit, and to my surprise and dismay, to this day, I have no idea who it was that knocked and waved. This happened quite a few years ago when I was at uni. My friends and I were living on a ground floor flat and my room was at the front of the building. Outside my window was the front garden. My boyfriend, at the time, and I had literally just finished having sex and I put my head on the pillow and glanced to my right, which is where the window was. There was a gap between the curtain and the window and I was met with a pair of eyes watching me. We both, me and the peeper, had the instinct to look away and then quickly look back. At this point, I shouted to my ex, that there was someone watching us from outside. He jumped, opened the window and shouted various amusing warnings. From further inspection the next morning, we found out that he had jumped the small hedge and exited through my neighbor's garden. I told my friends and was pretty freaked out by the whole event. However, my lovely friends decided to walk by my flat late the next night and bang on the window and make sex noises. I almost shat myself. 18 years old and first time ever operating a dozer with an open-air cab and roll cage. Was clearing trees out of a waterway on a farm. All of a sudden I'm knocked out. Come to and blood is running down my face into my lap. Dozer pushing up against a tree, just spinning tracks. My neck and head hurt, no idea. Nobody around me. Wasn't told how to shut off the dozer as it was an older 6C. You don't just turn the key off. Called my dad and he runs over and pulls the idle bar all the way down and it shuts off. Never saw it or anything. I work in a supermarket, early shift, and part of my job is changing the shelf labels for the price changes each day. Just this Wednesday gone I was putting new labels on a shelf of hand soap when, about 2 foot along the shelf from me, a bottle shot off and landed in the middle of the aisle. I've never directly witnessed anything else, but, being one of the first on the shop floor each day, I'm now questioning all the items that I see sitting in the aisles first thing and guessing I can't blame untidy customers for them all. While cutting lawns along this bike trail, me and a coworker found a mostly decayed, severed from the knee down, leg. Cops were called, they questioned us and we never found out any more about what happened. Pretty creepy. Years ago when I was a senior in high school, I had a day where I wasn't feeling too great. So I decided, as I occasionally did, to skip out on my last 2 classes and head home. That meant no school buses obviously, so I would just walk the 3 miles home. Eventually I came across a dead cat lying in the middle of the trail. As I walked around it I noticed another dead cat to my left. Looked to my right and sure enough there was another. Creeped out, I looked behind me and noticed two more, and yet another two in front of me, almost like a half-assed pentagram. I speeded up the pace and got the hell out of there. Never took that trail again. Thinking back, a really weird thing is that there was no visible damage to any of the cats, to blood or cuts, the dead. My 3-year-old, who is normally very happy-go-lucky, was extremely concerned the other day. He kept looking around the room talking about the rhino. Who knows what a 3-year-old might translate as a rhino. This went on for about 20 minutes, he was very concerned and looking around the entire time. If you made it to the end of the video, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share, and we will see you in the next video.